International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Algeria has underlined during the annual meeting of the 67th session of the Commission on Narcotics or Narcotic Drug held in Vienna, Austria, the importance of regional and international cooperation in the fight against this scourge. As the Palestinian Foreign Ministry called for the opening of all crossing points to allow in aid to Gaza, more bombardments have been carried out by the Israeli army against various parts of the besieged enclave. And the people in Russia are casting their ballot as part of the third and last day of the presidential election, which outgoing President Vladimir Putin, running for a new term, is set to win. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First, in our news, Algeria has underlined during the annual meeting of the 67th session of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs held in Vienna, Austria, the importance of regional and international cooperation in the fight against this scourge, stressing the need to fully comply with the three agreements of monitoring drugs while drafting international policies in this field. Algeria's permanent representative to the UN and international organizations in Vienna, Ambassador Larbi Latrache, has recalled during the general debate sessions Algeria's membership in the international coalition for the fight against industrial drugs. He calls on this respect for the necessity to pool efforts to combat the scourge of drugs and joint and efficient action to curb the continuous threats emanating from traditional drugs, foremost of which is cannabis. Mr. Latrache presented on the occasion the pluridisciplinary and participative approach adopted by Algeria for the fight against drugs, which gives a large space for the contribution of civil society. It's worth recalling that the 67th session of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs started last Thursday and will continue until next Friday, March 22nd. Algeria and Azerbaijan grant a particular attention to strengthening cooperation ties and promoting bilateral relations. Mariam Bershi has more details in this report.
The Special Envoy of Azerbaijan, President Alkeen Amirbayev, said the opening of diplomatic missions in both Baku and Algiers strengthened relations between the two countries, particularly between the members of the two governments. He said Algeria and Azerbaijan have had a lot of exchanges over the last years, which reflect their interest to further strengthen political and economic relations between Baku and Algiers. He also recalled that the President of Azerbaijan visited Algiers on the occasion of the summit meeting of the Arab League, which he attended as guest of honor, adding that his country is looking forward to welcoming the Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune at the Baku Conference on Climate Change, COP29, scheduled for next November. The Azerbaijani official said that he had discussions with Algerian officials at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Parliament on the ways and means to boost economic relations between the two countries, stressing that they discussed the creation of a joint intergovernmental commission. He added that he had submitted the draft agreement of the commission, which is to be finalized soon, adding that the installation of the commission will facilitate identifying areas of cooperation.
As the Palestinian Foreign Ministry called for the opening of all crossing points to allow in aid in Gaza, more bombardments have been carried out by the Israeli army against various parts of the besieged enclave. At least 92 people have been killed and 130 others wounded in the attacks that mainly hit the central region of Deir el-Balah, as well as Khan Yunis in the southern part of the territory. This brought to over 31,500 the number of people killed since the Israeli army launched its attack on Gaza last October. In this connection, the Palestinian Foreign Ministry stressed the necessity to allow more aid into Gaza, affirming that the aid that has reached the enclave so far is insufficient, considering the tremendous needs of the Palestinian civilians. It was quoted by the news agency Wafa saying that it is important that the continued relief campaigns be coupled with genuine international efforts to rapidly secure a ceasefire. This came as the World Health Organization called on Israel to renounce attacking Rafah as planned by the Israeli government, saying it feared a new escalation of violence in the densely populated area will lead to further deaths and sufferings. And Human Rights Watch has urged the international community to impose sanctions on the Israeli occupation for its failure to comply with the International Court of Justice's order to take provisional measures in Gaza to prevent genocide of the Palestinian people. Asif Bakar has more.
The organization stated that countries should impose targeted sanctions and an arms embargo on the Israeli occupation to comply with the relevant order issued by the International Court of Justice in January. With regards to South Africa's support to the Palestinian struggle for independence, especially amid the current massacre committed in Gaza and the genocide case it filed at the International Court of Justice, South African journalist Don-Jack Cornish said the struggle of Palestinians for independence resembles South Africa's struggle to end apartheid.
Well, South Africa has exceedingly close ties to the Palestinians for the same reason, exact same reason as it has very, very close ties to Algeria, in that we stood together at the time of apartheid. Now, Nelson Mandela, as president, said, we will not be free, that's we, South Africa, will not be free, until Palestine is free. So we've always had these historic ties. We've had important ties with Israel, but it must never be forgotten that under the apartheid regime, Israel assisted South Africa in acquiring nuclear weapons, which of course we voluntarily gave up. We're the only country to have ever done that. Relations with Israel under the African National Congress government have deteriorated, there's no doubt. Now, what happened in Gaza was lamentable, the killing of the Israelis on the 7th of October, and we condemned that. However, the so-called self-defense that followed far exceeded any reasonable expectation of defense. The current death toll, I think it reached that yesterday, 30,000 people. At the time we brought our case to the International Court of Justice, it was well into the 20s already. And it was disproportionate. It was punishment, group punishment of people, of innocent people. And we just felt that the International Court of Justice, and we, as the apartheid regime, appeared before that court in terms of its occupation of Namibia. We know what it's there for. It's an important court, and that's why we brought the case.
He added that condemning and suing the Israeli occupation and its apartheid actions is a moral action that stands with humanitarian and international law, and more countries should join the case.
Now, a lot of countries, many Africans obviously, but other countries too, realized that what we were doing had moral justification, and I'm rather proud of the fact we've done it. When South Africa emerged as a democracy, it had real moral weight in the world under Nelson Mandela. What happened in our taking this action to The Hague has brought that up again, has increased it, not to the same level, but increased it. And the case itself was very interesting because the Israelis have a very poor understanding of the multilateral system. They brought judges, many of them British trained judges, with the wigs and Queen's Counsel, or King's Counsel now they would be called. And they were very articulate and very bright, and made points that, you would think were insurmountable. The South Africans were far less experienced, but they spoke from the heart, and they quoted UN and humanitarian organizations and UN officials. Now, many of the Israeli argument was that this was effectively not substantive evidence. This was the opinions of many. However, when the judges ruled, all many of the quotes from the South Africans, or many of the situations quoted by South Africa, were raised, and that was they were taken aboard. Now, what would have been first prize for us would have been to have gotten a ceasefire and ordered a ceasefire, but that didn't happen. But they did say that Israel has to take care not to commit any actions that could lead to genocide.
Following South Africa's genocide case filed against the Israeli occupation, the International Court of Justice requested at the end of last January that the Israeli occupation take all measures to prevent any actions that could be considered genocide, ensure that the Israeli occupation does not commit any acts of genocide, and prevent any statements or public comments that could incite genocide in Gaza. The Israeli occupation has not complied with the court's orders and has failed to deliver aid and basic services to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
And the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, has announced that 1 in 3 children under the age of 2 now suffers from acute malnutrition in the northern Gaza Strip, adding that famine is threatening the enclave, which is the scene of Zionist genocidal war for over 6 months now. The people in Russia are casting their ballot as part of the third and last day of the presidential elections in the country, which outgoing President Vladimir Putin, running for a new term, is set to win. The first polls in Russia's presidential election opened in the country's easternmost Kamchatka Peninsula region at 8 a.m. local time on Friday, with the vast voting exercise spanning 11 time zones set to finish in the westernmost Kaliningrad enclave at 8 p.m. on Sunday. Along with outgoing President Vladimir Putin, there are 3 other candidates. In DRC, fighting has resumed between M23 rebel forces and the government forces and their allies in the strategic town of Saki in the eastern part of the country, following 20 days of lull. At least 8 peacekeepers of the UN Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, MONUSCO, were wounded, including one seriously in an attack carried out in the North Kivu province in the eastern part of the country. The head of the MONUSCO mission, Bintou Keita, formally condemned the attack while affirming the commitment of the MONUSCO mission by the side of the Congolese Defense and Security Forces to reinforce joint and unilateral patrols in order to protect the population. And several political leaders and civil society officials have called for restraint following the announcement of the killing of 16 soldiers killed in the Delta State located in the south of Nigeria, where they were deployed as part of a conciliation mission between the two communities. Fearing an escalation of violence, Senator Eddie Dafinon of the Delta State called on the factions of the conflicts to show calm and restraints. That's the end of our news bulletin. Now I invite you to listen to an interview conducted by our colleague Asad Kar with the co-founder of the Palestine Festival of Literature, Omar Robert Hamilton. And with this last piece of news, we come to the end of this news bulletin. We'll meet you again tomorrow for additional news bulletin. Thank you.
أشلاء أطفال